Ein redaktioneller Hinweis: Dieses Gespräch wurde geführt, bevor Russland die Ukraine angegriffen hat.
Erstklassisch mit Mischke, der musikalische Podcast des Hamburger Abendblatts.
Schönen guten Tag zu einer neuen Folge. Ich bin diesmal weder in meinem Arbeitszimmer noch in der Elbphilharmonie, sondern ein klein bisschen weiter auswärts, nämlich in Oslo. Und habe das Glück und die Gelegenheit, mit einem Dirigenten zu sprechen, der mich sehr interessiert, der auch demnächst nach Hamburg kommt. Er ist relativ jung, vorsichtig ausgedrückt, und er ist momentan Chefdirigent in Oslo und Chefdirigent in Paris und kommt nach Hamburg, um am Ende des Musikfests Ende Mai alle Sibelius-Sinfonien zu dirigieren mit dem Oslo Philharmonic. Und es ist ein Finne und er heißt Klaus Mäkelä, und wir sind jetzt hier in seinem Büro in der Philharmonie in Oslo im Konzerthaus, und ich bin sehr gespannt, wie das alles abläuft, worüber wir zu reden haben. Da gibt es einiges, aber jedenfalls erstmal schön, dass es geklappt hat. Und da mein Finnisch nicht vorhanden ist, machen wir das Ganze auf Englisch, und das wird aber, glaube ich, trotzdem ganz gut funktionieren. So, welcome Klaus Mäkelä, thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about
thank you so
whatever's
much.
going on.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I just explained what your career is like, and your career is quite amazing in a way. We always start here either with a easy question or a complicated one. Which one would you prefer?
Well, the complicated one, please.
The complicated one,
Yeah,
okay.
please.
Why aren't you afraid of conducting? I would be. I mean, there are so many things that can go wrong in a second, in a minute, in the first 2 minutes. Is there something like fear left in you, or is this something that feels completely natural because you don't have anything to fear?
Yeah, I think it's a lovely question. I think everyone approaches conducting from their own path, and I was very lucky to have the great teacher Jorma Panula as my mentor when I was very, very young, and his wish was to have all of us start as young as possible, because then the habit of conducting would become very, very natural. So I started when I was 12, and then every week we had a little orchestra, a little ensemble, which consisted of some of our friends playing, some people from the academy, and then some professional musicians. And when we did every week, we stood in front of the orchestra. It became the most natural, most not relaxed, but sort of a very comfortable place to be. And I still, when I go in front, I feel exactly the same as I feel now sitting here. And of course, I think in music, it's all about risk, and it's all about sort of rehearsing everything, and then in the moment when you know when you can be free, to set yourself free. And I must say I enjoy that, but it's always a matter of balance. Of course, it's everything in life.
And so it's like learning to swim. It's completely easy when you're 2 or 3, but it's dangerous and terrible when you're starting to learn this when you're 85.
Exactly, or learning Finnish. That's the same. That's the same. But of course, what we forget about conducting, easily learning about it, is that actually, I mean, conducting is very abstract. And if we are being completely honest, the technical aspects of conducting are not very difficult to learn. I mean, anyone can learn them, and anyone can learn them in a practically very, very short period of time. And that's not really difficult. Of course, one very important aspect is, of course, the psychological part. Because, I mean, everything you say, you can say in so many different ways, and your job is to make 100 artists sound like one and all do their best and feel like it comes from within them and not from me. And it's creating this illusion, which I think matters. But of course, I mean, conductor is above all a musician, and even if you would have the most perfect technique, it doesn't matter. You're not a good conductor if you're not a good musician, and learning that takes your whole life. And one of my great forbilder is Herbert Blomstedt, who was here also in Oslo. Looking at his picture right now, he was here chief conductor in the 60s, and he still comes back every year, and every year he's just better and better.
You sort of took my easy question away, because I brought you a quote from Christoph von Dohnanyi, who is about 94, something like that now, and he said to me once, conducting is not complicated, making music is complicated.
Exactly. That's exactly that. And yeah, the physical act of conducting is nothing difficult, but the making music is the never-ending quest. And even if one learns fast, one should never learn fast. And to take time in everything is always better than to rush into something in music. I believe that every interpretation should be able to have very well argumented backgrounds. So if you decide to do something agogic or change something in the balance or in articulation, you should have always a very, very good reason to do that. Because I mean, music is something which should feel like it's born in the moment. But especially complicated orchestra music, it has to have everything very carefully thought through in order that to sound and be free in the moment.
We have to get rid of an obvious topic in the beginning. For all the people who don't know who you are and how long you're doing what you're doing now, you're chief in Oslo, you're chief in Paris, and you started as the chief here in Oslo. You had a 3 years contract and it was prolonged for 7 years before you actually began. You started in Paris with a 2-year contract and it's been prolonged to 5 years before you began. If I'm not wrong, you are the first guest of Swedish Radio Orchestra. You are the chief of the Turku Festival in Finland. You're working with the Tapiola Sinfonietta and you're 26. Yeah,
I confess.
The obvious question is, isn't this too much of a career, and isn't it too much and too soon?
I leave it to others to decide. But I mean, I never think of career because that would be. I don't know what good that brings in my life. But what brings very good things into my life is thinking about music, and I do most of my decisions when it comes to, or I do all of my decisions which have to do with the work. I do them on musical grounds and reasons. And for example, I like to commit to things because I believe that you get a better result if you work with people you know continuously, because then you can continue where you left the previous time. And that's why I rather decide to commit to certain institutions rather than have sort of nice 1 week there, another week there, and then another week here with different programs. Because I feel that gives me many more opportunities to actually express much more deeply what we want to do together.
I did some math and I looked some things up and I found, and I was right, which was nice. Bernstein's famous start with the New York Philharmonic was in 1943 when he was 25. Salonen's famous start with Philharmonia Orchestra in 1983 was when he was 25. And now you're 26, you're a bit further away. And so does this make you anxious, or is this something that's on your mind when you think of careers like this starting at the same age? I mean, so you're not as unique as you seem to be right now, but you're not the first one who started this early, but you know where this ends. I mean, you know where Bernstein ended, you know where Salonen ended. So what's the pressure like?
No, I mean, these are two wonderful, wonderful musicians, and I wouldn't even dare to compare myself to them. But I mean, I think age is a wonderful thing because I mean, it only gives you it's a parameter to tell how long you've been on this planet. But I mean, everyone has a completely different sort of development, and some people bloom early, some people bloom late. And I think what matters is that how you do what.
Blooming is important.
Yeah.
Okay. Is your cello career completely over and finished now? Because you started as a cello player, or you were dual in a way. You played cello quite good. You conducted quite early. But is there time left for you to play cello in a professional way, or is it just a nice hobby now? Or?
I mean, to be honest, in my heart I'm a cellist, but I perform less and less. I play a lot for my own fun, not for the fun of others, haha. But chamber music still is the sort of the thing which keeps me alive in some ways. If I get to play, I do maybe 4 or 5 chamber music projects a year. Mm-hmm. And those I know I can prepare because I can plan and I know I'm going to play this and that, and I can maybe do the same piece and something. And that's just, it gives me so much. Last week we did Brahms Clarinet Quintet, Opus 115 in Paris with the musicians of my orchestra and then Isabel Faust. And I was just, that was one of the highlights of my year, to get to play with Isabel and these musicians. And the chamber music repertoire, just, all of them, all these jewels, these pearls of of chamber music. They're just, one needs to play them once a year, and then you feel like you have energy for the rest of the year just because of that.
But playing on the stage is one thing. Practicing is needed as well, and that's the problem. I think if your schedule is like I guess it is, there's no time for practicing.
Of course, and I mean when it comes to sort of, I would not be able to play in the same way as Julian Rachlin plays or Nikolai Schneider who play as a soloist and conduct very, very regularly. So I mean, in my case, it's playing a few chamber music projects which I know when I can plan, when I can prepare, and I play cello more or less every day. And then if I know I have a concert coming up, then I practice a little bit more.
Mm. If I'm not wrong, you come from a family of musicians. Was there some sort of pressure from all your relatives? Because I don't know. You said I want to become a dentist, and everybody cried out, "No, you have to become a musician."
I think they wished I would be a dentist. I mean, I was very lucky because I had a very, very encouraging musical family, but they were never pushing. And sometimes they were actually being like, come on, just stop that and do something normal. And they are very, very nice because they never pushed, but they were helpful when I needed it. So I must say I'm very happy about it. But I mean, I guess it runs a bit in the family because there are so many family members who do that, but I found it rather nice. Maybe not very refreshing because I mean, you've been sort of growing up in this environment, which I think is wonderful, inspiring. To hear them practice and play. But I don't think they never actually wished that I would become a musician because they know sort of what it takes and what it is.
Mm. I wasn't really able to find out how your beginning was like. I mean, you seem to be some sort of child prodigy. You were very good as a cello player, and then you started being a student of Pamula. So you started becoming a conductor at the academy in Helsinki. But I couldn't find anything about your first engagements. What it was like? Was it because all of a sudden you had these chief positions, and I thought there must be something in between. It just can't happen like one day he's at university and the next day he's in Paris getting this job. So what happened in between?
Yeah. Thank you for the kind words. Panula had a very good method of teaching because I mean teaching conducting is so difficult because conducting is so abstract, as I said earlier, and in a way. It was a very valuable experience to conduct even the little rehearsal orchestra we had at school. So every week we did something and there were real players reacting to your beat. And then we watched, after every lesson, we watched it again, the whole lesson. And then you could see yourself, from the video, oh, I did that and I did that. Oh, that's terrible. That's completely unuseful and so on. And then, usually... In Finland, there is a very good network of orchestras. I mean, it's a very small country. We have 5.5 million people and 3.5 million saunas. But it's a very small country, but lots of orchestras, different sizes, different repertoire, different character. And then usually, if there is a young conductor who shows a little bit of promise, the little orchestras, they invite him or her to do some first children concert and then some maybe real concert and so there's a lot of support from the orchestra network and a lot of goodwill. And then, of course, I did that, and I went through all the orchestras. I did some bigger pieces, some smaller pieces. And another very important thing for my development was to play in the orchestra. I was substituting a lot in the Helsinki Philharmonic and in the Finnish radio, and a little bit at the opera too. And that taught me so many things, because when you were playing yourself, then you could react to the conductor. You saw, okay, what he or she did well, what wasn't so good, and then which things kind of worked. And also you got to know a lot of repertoire, because it was nice to play. And I always enjoyed playing.
But did you have some sort of special occasion, something like this Bernstein event where someone else got sick, Bernstein was sort of drunk, and he had to jump into it last minute, and all of a sudden he was famous? And did you have something like this? Like you were at a smaller orchestra, you conducted, and there was an agent in the room, and you were discovered like Claudia Schiffer, and everybody said, this is the next Toscanini, we have to sign him. Was this a longer process? I just can't imagine this. How did this next step take place?
I think in the musical world, quite many things sort of go so that if there is someone who shows a little bit of something, some promise, perhaps, then people talk a little bit. And of course, there are a lot of Finnish Finnish musicians, conductors, who work with the agents and who travel around. And I think in this case, I had one concert in Helsinki with the Philharmonic where I did Petrushka. That was one of the sort of first bigger concerts I had. And then I remember there were then suddenly a few agents interested, and then I started working with Harrison and Parrott then. So that was maybe sort of the moment when I sort of took a step to sort of more international after the going around the Finnish orchestras.
Mm. How's your blood pressure when you look into your calendar now? I mean, I try to find out where you're supposed to do the things you do, and it's a lot.
Yeah, I mean it's very much, but I enjoy very much because when you work with people who give you a lot of energy, at the end, even I like to work with full intensity. Also in rehearsal, because I believe if you don't do rehearsals with full intensity, I mean you just can't leave it to the concert to see whether actually there is something. You need to try some certain things. But the orchestra always gives more than what I give to them back in energy, and that keeps me alive, to be honest. And that gives so much of inspiration. And what always just is exhausting is the traveling, because that you can't escape. I mean, you have to check in, check out, and wait in lines and travel, and that's something which is the necessity which you. I mean, without that you can't do all the nice orchestras. Mm. But then when you get to some place, there's always friends in every city. The orchestras are very welcoming, and it really feels at home every week. So I enjoy it very much. But of course, one needs to be very careful. I mean, you need to make sure you know all the pieces you're going to do. So and usually we know a few years in advance. In 2 years I'm going to do this piece, which means that if I'm clever, I will start working on it now, because you can never start a piece too early, but you can start too late. So I mean that's something. But if you have that sorted out, then we just create different routines, and I try to make everything as comfortable as possible when it comes to traveling, and then that's the only way.
Then the logical next step would be, I mean, I think you're living in Helsinki, right?
Yes, that's my base. Yeah.
Yes, the place you were born. And so the next logical step would be just to wait until next year when Mäkelä is going to leave. Helsinki Philharmonic is free. You have the Musiikitalo. You have the nice concert hall in Helsinki. You just can go there by bus or by bike. Everything's okay and perfect.
Oh, they're sweet people. Yeah.
But that's not on your mind.
Well, not exactly. Now I already have a bit too many orchestras.
Okay. If I'm not wrong, your wife is a cellist as well.
Mm-hmm.
How did this come about? I mean, two cello players meeting each other is quite easy to understand how this did come about, but isn't it complicated? She has a festival of her own, if I'm not wrong.
Actually, that's true. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I found that she has some summer festival somewhere.
Oh yes, she's with her quartet. She used to have. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But
yes, not anymore. Yes.
How do you manage to arrange your calendars? Do you see each other just by when one is going to get a new piece of luggage and the other one is bringing the old luggage back home, or what's that
That's
like?
a wonderful question. I think lives of artists together are always something which you need to have a lot of flexibility, and lots of flexibility, but it's wonderful because in the musical world we all kind of all know each other. And then it's also for her very easy to just arrive for a concert or something, join for a little time, because I mean the musical world we are very, everybody is more or less friends. I mean there are only a few people who don't have the sort of good attitude towards others, and so everyone tries to help each other to if there's a possibility to invite for a dinner or something, it's rather done together nicely than leaving someone out.
Mm. Right now it's an interesting time because on the one side you have these, in big brackets, these dinosaurs still walking the earth like Muti, Meta, Barenboim, and on the other hand, on the other side there's people like you, there's Mirga, there's Santo Matthias Ruvali in London. Just a few days ago, a conductor was picked from Kammerphilharmonie Bremen. His name is Tamo Peltokoski.
Yes,
I've never heard of him.
Yes.
He is so sort of the successor of Paavo Järvi, and he's 21.
Yes,
So it's child labor in a way.
Yeah.
But how does this feel for you, being inside this business? On the one side, there's these big names, these old, really famous conductors. On the other side, there's the younger generation coming up, women coming up, people with different ideas, and people trying to get to positions and into opportunities that have been blocked for decades by these older and more renowned conductors. I mean, it's a natural process in a way. There's always change, but on the other hand, it's quite dramatic right now because you have two very disparate groups.
Maybe yes. I mean, I think it's an interesting point. I never thought about it really, but on the other hand, so many of these, as you mentioned also earlier, many of these conductors in the history started actually very young, and I guess also they were faced with a sort of similar situation in some ways. But I mean, I've always been, I have great respect towards all my colleagues because, I appreciate, everyone comes from such a different background, everyone has a very different story, very different path in a way to where they are now. And I don't think that anyone who has sort of gotten some sort of status is such a bad word, but some sort of this sort of, status is there for no reason. So I think everyone has deserved it. I love to listen to old recordings, historical recordings, and what I always find so fascinating, especially about the older generation of conductors, is that they are in a way some of the last links between our time and then some of the historical figures who happen to live a very long life. I mean, even if you think about, composers like some of my favorites, like Shostakovich, who died in the 70s, mid-70s, or people like Mission or Prokofiev, who of course died much earlier, but anyway, or Sibelius, even not that long ago. In a way, of course, our musical generation is already starting to get more and more far from sort of the actual possibility of having some contact to these kind of people. On the other hand, the musical trends, I feel a little bit of a sort of revival of a certain aesthetic. If you listen to soloists these days, string players, for example, the youngest string players, many of them have this sort of sound ideal of the past, much more than, let's say, 10, 15 years ago.
Since you mentioned this topic, long life, how difficult is it for you being in this situation right now? On the one hand, there's this pressure from the business that you should be as visible as possible and as omnipresent as possible and as fast as possible. And on the other hand, you can take your time because you can easily say, I'm 26, if I wait for 10 years to get this post or this position, what the heck, then I'll be 36 and I'm still young. And so how do you manage? Is it easy for you to say, I'll be patient, or is there some sort of ambition in you as well that you have always to take back and to say, calm, I can wait, why the hurry?
I mean, to be honest, I haven't felt any pressure from the industry, but maybe I work with people who are balanced themselves, who don't feel that they have to push me. I'm very lucky I get to work with very, very lovely people who I feel that I've never had to say anything. I mean, I feel that they're always on my side rather than anyone else's side. So I have not felt it. So it's difficult to speak of personal experience. But I guess the good ambition of musician to have is to have the musical ambition. But I don't believe in saying that, I want to have this orchestra by when I'm this and this, or I want to do this and this and this. I think it's a little bit, setting those kind of things I don't see productive for myself. But I want to think, okay, I would really want to do, let's say, Bluebeard's Castle by Bartók. Or let's say, actually, I really want to do Debussy Pelléas. But in order to do it, I want to speak French, because otherwise I feel that I would be a little bit of fraud. If I could know it very well, but still, if I don't speak French, I'm missing something, and then I don't feel content. So I rather have these kind of ambitions rather than say I want to, conduct Vienna Philharmonic by something. I don't see that very productive.
Just today, you had a date for for an audition for the orchestra here in Oslo.
Yes.
What is that like? I mean, you're about as old as the students who come here to apply for a job, and you're the boss saying, okay, you might be the one, you have to wait for another year. Isn't this weird? I mean, conducting is one thing, but picking musicians is even weirder, I think, because you're a musician yourself, you're a practicing musician, you're not a conductor who doesn't play, but you're a musician who plays. You know what it's like to sit in an audition, I guess.
Yes.
And then you're on the other side now, moving the thumb upward or downward. What's it like for you? Is it like, this is part of my job, I have to do this, or does it feel completely comfortable? Or
I love very much that part, because I mean it is building the orchestra, and by doing these commitments I've also taken the dedication to improve the orchestra, and the chief conductor is always responsible for the artistic development of the orchestra, and the auditions are a very, very crucial part of it, because of course also when there's a new position we must make sure that we have the perfect person to continue, and it's very interesting because it's not necessarily, I mean, music competitions are always so terrible. I hate the concept of a competition. Because it's in a way, I mean, it can be very good for young soloists, you know, to get exposure, but that's all. Competitions are for horses. Who said that? I don't remember. But auditions is interesting because you're actually not choosing the best player, but you're choosing the most suitable player for the orchestra. And of course, we want that person to be technically and musically superior of the candidates, but at the end it needs to be someone who fits the group, and or we believe that is someone who will bring something needed to the group, and that I find very, very interesting, and there is no right or wrong, and sometimes, you know, you choose someone who shows great promise in audition, but then it turns out that it doesn't somehow fit. There is personal chemistry or something else which doesn't work. Okay, then you try something else, and it's very interesting. But it depends also. My jobs in Oslo and Paris are very different, because in Oslo the role is more typically Scandinavian. So here it's very much about the dialogue. I actually don't have even an official vote, but I have I can advise, which is very good, because, you know, then I can say my opinion. But then there is a jury which consists of the musicians, and it all works in a sort of very sort of, the orchestra feels very empowered, which is very good. In Paris it's a little bit different. There is also very much dialogue, but then also I'm the president of the jury, which means that I actually have to say, and I have the veto right. So one has to sort of you have to always adapt yourself in the culture you're working at, and of course you always need to adapt and also bring something which is needed. And that's the same with the orchestra musicians, because orchestra is an institution. I love it, you know, because in a way, in today's orchestra we can hear the orchestra 100 years ago when it was founded, because every musician is replaced one at a time, and the new one always brings something new and adapts to the old. So in a way, the tradition is carried generation after generation, and I love really about the institution of an orchestra.
Speaking about traditions, now's the time to talk about Sibelius. You've recorded all the symphonies. You're coming to Hamburg with these symphonies, all 7, and you've recorded several other pieces by him as well. But I'm not from Finland, I can imagine, but I don't know. And what's better than asking a Finn, why are these symphonies so important for people from Finland? And why are they important even when you're not from Finland?
Yeah, that's a lovely question. I mean, being Finnish, the influence of Sibelius is massive, because it sort of comes through every possible angle. Because, you know, we sing his Christmas carols, and you know, if you study an instrument, you play his miniatures, or the first things you play in an orchestra is a symphony or a string orchestra piece. So it comes from everywhere, and even though we don't live anymore a time of sort of national heroes, I think that time is a little bit past. But still, you know, Sibelius is someone in a little country can be very proud of, which gave the country something very special. You know, some pride in that. You know, someone from a small country can do something great. But I mean, without being very romantic, the symphonies, they are 7 masterpieces, which are a beautiful journey from something which has their legs very strongly rooted in the sort of Germanic, slightly Russian tradition, and then through the years they become something completely independent and completely original, and in a beautiful way they are the ones who were creating trends, and they were also following trends. So in a way, for example, the Fifth Symphony, originally written in 1915, was Sibelius' reaction to the European modernism, which he was very much aware of what was going on. And then the Sixth and the Seventh, he was, again, sort of Seventh, for example, he was really trying to, and managed to create an architectural masterpiece, which no one else had done before him in such a way, to have one symphony which includes everything, as Mahler would say, the whole world, in 20 minutes. And he says more in 20 minutes than Mahler says in his Third Symphony, 1.5 hours, which is of course not true, but that's the point. Orchestration-wise, it's also very interesting, because it starts from this sort of rather traditional, again German-influenced, very fine instrumentating, but then he changes completely the everything around. So, for example, the Fifth Symphony, the strings play very rarely melodies, but they play all kind of different textures, and those textures are molded sometimes so that which is in the background can suddenly be in the foreground, then it turns again upside down, and they reveal a world which is just something very unique and something completely original from other composers. And I think that's good. You can hear some influences in the beginning, but it becomes something extremely original and just speaks to me very, very much. And they are all so different and so wonderful. And what's most important, the proportions are always right. Because there is nothing more annoying than if someone who writes a beautiful piece, but it's 10 minutes too long. To the material. But Sibelius always has the right proportion, material, substance, form.
You know that this composer especially had a hard time in the German room because of Adorno, the famous philosopher, who said this notorious quote that they aren't 1,000 lakes even when they have 1,000 holes. And yeah. That was that for Sibelius for decades.
Yes, yeah, I know.
Nobody dared touch this music.
Yes, except Karajan, who did absolutely amazing. I mean, he was one of the great Sibelius interprets. And actually, Sibelius heard some of his early recordings. And he said, he wrote to Walter Legge, who was the producer, and the impresario, that Karajan is the one who understands my music.
So Adorno is wrong?
Definitely.
Okay, so we changed that. But I wonder, how long did you work at this cycle, at these symphonies? Were they so natural for you that you said, okay, I know what this is about, we don't have to work longer than usual? Or did it take an extra time because this is a national treasure for Finnish musicians and it's like the Holy Grail, and if you touch it in the wrong way then you're doomed for decades? How was this work like? And no puns intended, but what are you doing differently than Rettel or Oramo or whoever? Did you just want to do it right, or did you want to do something new with them?
I mean, my approach was to do it in a way that I believe they should be played. And of course, I mean, if I would not feel that I really want to express that, it would be nonsense to record them, because in that case, no one needs it. The Sibelius symphonies really offer every conductor a canvas to paint completely different pictures, from the same notes, because even though he writes sometimes quite precisely, there's a million different opportunities, different approaches when it comes to the balance, the tempi, the articulation, overall shaping of things, how to pace symphonies, and so on. And they, in a way, I think Sibelius interpretations differ, in my opinion, more than, let's say, interpretations of other symphonies in the canon, so to say. When we did this cycle here, it was a little bit of an unusual project, because we were originally supposed to play it in concert over one season and then record it as a concert performance with 1 day of extra recording, patching. We started playing it in concert, but it was during the pandemic, so then we thought, okay, we're going to wait until we can play again with normal distance. But then we realized a year ago, in January 2021, that this is actually going to continue, and there was a whole lockdown in Norway. Everything was closed, and here they believe in authorities very, very much, so everything was, like a ghost town. And actually I wasn't even allowed in the country because they had very strict, and I had to apply for a special permit. And then we thought, okay, we either have to record it all now with the distance, which is 1.5 meters between everyone, or then we will not do it, because then it would be in the next season, but we can't just find suddenly time for 7 symphonies to be recorded. Mm-hmm. So then we just started recording in January 2021. Or was it in February, actually, officially recording? I probably traveled here for 14-day quarantine before that. And we had a very unusual time because everything was closed, and we played only Sibelius that spring with the orchestra. That was all we played. And the orchestra came to the hall. We played. Then they went home because nothing was open. Like it was, and everyone lived a little bit like in a sort of Sibelius bubble, in a sort of complete immersion. And it was quite special because Sibelius, as every language, is every composer is a language you have to learn, and the more fluent you can speak it, the more fluent these sort of different textures and those come alive. And we started with the second symphony. We played 3 and 5, and then 4, and more we played, the more familiar the musicians became with the music. Because of course some symphonies they played a lot, like the first and the second, but some symphonies many players never played the fourth or even the third or the sixth. And it was wonderful. It was really unusual, but it was sort of highly concentrated, and we're all very happy that we have a document of what happened that spring, which was otherwise such an unusual time. Yeah.
So we're back to the question: what did you do? Did you do it? Did you want to do it right, or did you want to do something new? What was your ambition?
I never do things for the sake of doing them differently, because I have to make sure that everything I do has a background or like an argument. But of course, naturally, every conductor shapes the sound, the pieces, everything differently. And in this case, I wanted to use all the material I've had, this far, learning about the symphonies, conducting them with different orchestras, putting that experience together, and then want to create something which, for me, would be the ideal Sibelius cycle, which needs to be varied. So we need to start with this sort of almost a little bit Tchaikovsky young man's passion and this sort of almost unbearable enthusiasm and drama from the first symphony. Then towards the experienced composers' classic ideals of the 6th and 7th, where everything is pure, and the intention is having everything as clean and pure in expression as possible, without any excess emotion, which is exactly where it started. And of course, the way of playing this also changed. So we worked a lot on the sound and which kind of characters we need to bring out of it. And the balance is always the question in Sibelius: what you want to hear and what you don't want to hear. And there is a lot of choice you can do in that.
Mm-hmm. Coming back to more general questions, I wonder what it's like. Isn't it boring for you to just say yes or no to invitations now in this stage of your career, instead of having to fight for first chances and wanting to convince people that you're really as good as you think you are, and they have to believe you, they have to give you a chance. Now I guess it's quite easy. People call you, you don't call them. Your agency doesn't call people to get you somewhere. You have these offers. What's it like? It's like, it seems to me, it feels like there's this big buffet. You can pick whether you want cherries or apple or pie or whatever. You can just pick and say, okay, I'm in the mood for this now, and this one can wait. Wouldn't it be nicer to be more in a struggle, because then you feel that you have a success, then that you make progress, and now everything from the outside, from my perspective, seems to be so easy for you, which is great. I totally find it perfect. There's nothing wrong with it, but you see what I mean? I
get your point, of course. But I don't believe that one should necessarily have struggle in life in order to struggle in music. And I much rather, have my own sort of demons, while I study. Should this be in 2 or in 4, and should this be long or short, this B flat, or how is the balance and stuff. I'm very grateful for the opportunities I've gotten, and above all, I'm very grateful for the people who trusted me when I was very young, or younger, because those people are the valuable people who give you trust when they don't have to be nice. And those people you should always remember, who help just because they feel that it's something they want to do, and not that they benefit from it. And now I'm very happy because I try to optimize things. So if I do a guest conducting week, I want to, if I do a orchestra which has a reputation of playing very well certain type of music, I much rather do that kind of music with them, because that means that in a very short rehearsal time I might get more out of that. I might get a better performance most probably than if I would say, okay, let's do completely the other part. Then of course what takes most of my time is the music director things, so in Oslo and Paris, which means that I have to challenge the orchestra, which is actually kind of the complete opposite. So of course we have to do things we are good at, and especially recordings and tourings. We need to do things we believe that we are the strongest. But then above all, I should challenge them. So I should think, okay, what's something they need to get better at, and what's the right cure for it? So let's say, for example, now next time I'm in Oslo in April, we play B minor Mass, Hommelmesse, Bach, which is something the orchestra almost never played. And they will play it wonderfully, but it will be something we will all learn from, because it's music which we don't play every week, and it's not sort of the daily bread, even though Bach is the daily bread for many as musicians. But when you play it together, it's again a different thing. But now I think I went quite far from your question. I'm terribly sorry.
Okay, and we'll come back to something different then, because I've seen a short video recently from you from the Orchestre Paris, which is nice because you said conducting is also because you have the best spot. It sounds the best from where you are when you're on the stage at the center of the orchestra. Yeah. I've never heard conductors saying this so openly, and I thought this is nice. I mean, that's true. You stand there and you have all this sound coming at you, and you're the one to control it.
Yeah, I mean, it has the perfect balance also, because it has this effect of being almost a bit overwhelming, because the sound is so rich, especially in a good hall. But it's such a strange profession, because I mean it's all about communication, actually, much rather than moving hands and arms, and it's a wonderful feeling when you have this orchestra which knows you and you know them, and then you can really with very little gestures, very little facial expression or something, actually make it different. And when you feel that now the orchestra is really concentrating, then you can leave a little bit time, and then there will be a really beautiful color. Or then these moments, for example, yesterday when we played the Shostakovich and we rehearsed it and it was okay, and then in the concert Julian started at the very beginning with a sort of super pianissimo, and no one was prepared for that, because we expect that he would start in the same way as he started in the rehearsal, more or less. I mean, of course it's always different, but and then the effect that had in the orchestra, because everyone was suddenly in their toes. And which was a wonderful feeling, because then they were suddenly 100 times more sensitive. And then when he did something, then the orchestra immediately reacted what he did. And these moments are the best for a conductor, because then you really feel it's a living organism which is which needs this feeding of little impulses, which are this little change of color. And the more sensitive the musicians are, the better they are also.
Now I have two mean questions. The first one is your biggest strength as a conductor.
Ooh.
Yeah, I told you so.
But you should ask someone else, not me. But I have to answer, do I?
Be nice, yeah.
For myself?
Yes.
So what's my biggest strength?
As a conductor.
I'm a Finnish man, I can't talk about myself.
That's an easy way out. Okay, so the second mean question would be, what's your biggest weakness as a conductor?
Yeah, I mean, that's much better. That's much better. But yeah, I mean, that's easy to think about. Biggest weakness? I mean, we all have our personal tendencies. And for example, I know things I'm better at, for example, repertoire-wise than some other things. But if it would be something sort of very, very concrete, because I can't really sort of, What could it be? Because of course, there are a million things which I could say that I feel that I could do this and this repertoire better.
Something
later.
Like I can't conduct Schubert, it makes me sick, or something like
this. Yeah.
But I have no idea.
No, there are a lot of things one could be a lot better at, but especially I think the biggest difficult for a conductor difficulty is to master all the repertoire, and you can always get deeper in that. I think
that's such a reasonable answer.
I hate Nielsen.
Okay, you hate Nielsen.
Yeah.
Okay, but we're not in Denmark, so that's allowed.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
What about stage fright? I guess you don't know the word.
I enjoy the performance because we've been usually rehearsing for a week and then you get to present the results. But I also understand that it's very different to play than to conduct, because when you play you really feel that you are the moment on stage is the moment which counts. But if you're with an orchestra, actually the moment you are usually not nervous but which you're waiting for is actually the first rehearsal, because that's when you see where it starts from and how does it continue. Does it start off with the right foot, or do you have to see navigate a little bit through different things in order to get something together? So for conductor, I think many of the conductors, my colleagues, would say that probably the first rehearsal they are more afraid than the concert. I don't know.
Since you mentioned the concert last night, it's the first time I've been here at this hall in Oslo, and I was really shocked in a way to see the form of the hall and to see the shape, this triangular shape of the hall.
It's terrible. It's the worst hall in Europe.
Ah.
But it's a great orchestra, but it's an absolutely terrible hall, and we've been trying to get a new hall for decades, and Marius Janssens was also he
sort of died over it.
Yes, and he was really and the orchestra is such a brilliant orchestra, one of really the top for me, and they would really deserve a wonderful hall. They sound very good in this hall, which is a miracle because they do so much work. But always when we go on tour, it just raises 2 levels automatically when they get to play in a hall where all of the little colors and nuances they do suddenly are more present.
And if I'm not wrong, Marius Janssens was here for 23 years.
Yes, it was his longest. Yeah.
He didn't manage to get a new hall, and now you're here for 1 year and a bit, and you feel the pressure to get a new hall here as well. Do you manage to, or do you always explain and show them pictures of Elbphilharmonie or Philharmonie de Paris and tell them, look, you could have this. It's not cheap, but you could have something like this.
Exactly.
What's it like to be responsible for this as well, to get the orchestra a decent hall?
Yes, I hope that would work, and of course it's teamwork also. We have a wonderful person running the orchestra, Ingrid Røynesdal, who is extremely dedicated to this whole project also. And I believe that if there is someone who can make it work, it's her. And of course I want to be as helpful to that as possible. But the hall is such an important thing, and it's of course important for the orchestra, but also for the society and to the people. We can see in Hamburg and also in Paris which immense importance the hall has, and how much joy it brings to the people, and how it connects rather than tears apart.
What's it like being on the stage? It looks weird when you see this triangular shape, and the hall is so high, and I don't know how it sounds on stage. I wonder, it sounds really bad. I might think at the end of the hall.
Yes, and it's the problem with the hall is that the orchestra sounds always very good, but it's just the balance changes very much because of the shape of the hall, which is against the rules of acoustic. So
who allowed this?
I don't know. I wasn't alive then, so you approve. But the problem is that exactly that the balance changes very, very much. So depending where you sit, you might hear a lot of something, and on the other place you hear completely something else. And of course, in many ways this happens in every hall in the world, but of course it's just very minimal. But here it's quite huge, the differences. That's the thing.
I mentioned it at the beginning, your contracts with the 2 orchestras in Paris and in Oslo. I thought a long time, and I couldn't remember anybody who had his engagement prolonged before even starting. what was that like? Did they come up to you and say, "Oh, you haven't begun yet, but we want you for even longer"? And the second orchestra did this just as well. I mean, how did this feel? Like, I haven't begun. Wait, I'm not that good. Let me do the first concerts, and then you might change your mind. Or was it completely natural for you to say, "Okay, we'll do a few more years. What the heck"?
I think that was a really beautiful sign of trust from their side. Because originally both of the contracts, especially the Oslo one, which was only after one concert, and the one concert wasn't even a public concert, it was a concert with invited audience, which was kind of half improvised. So after that, of course, we both, we took quite a big risk. They bought a pig in a bag, we say in Finnish. And of course, for my side too, because we don't know each other that well. And then we did a few concerts before I officially began. I was here the next season, and it felt extremely nice. Mm-hmm. Extremely sort of comfortable and pleasant and everything. And then they said, look, I mean, this feels very special and we would like to have a longer planning horizon. And that was a very good point, because if you have a 3-year contract, it might feel very long. But in a classical music world, it's 1 month. It feels like 1 second, because if you plan ahead, you always plan at least 5 years ahead. And if you want to do a good strategy with the orchestra, which pieces we should play, what repertoire, what we should tour, what we should record, you need always a longer planning horizon. So actually the 7 years enables that.
And I guess Paris was quite easy because you have a decent hall in Paris.
Yeah, it's a wonderful orchestra and one of the best halls in the world. Yeah. One general topic, I always wonder, and it's always sort of complicated to explain, although it might be quite obvious, but what is it with Finns and good conductors? I mean, Susanna Melki, she's mentioned now for getting the New York Philharmonic, and you have these other Finnish conductors, and how does telling 100 people what to do and what not to do work so well with the national character of Finns that is rather like, oh no, I don't want to talk. I want to sit here in the sauna and wait for the sun to set and have a beer. How does this fit together? I always wonder this. If you think of Italians could be brilliant conductors, because Italians talk all the time, if you want to go into this cliche, but Finns don't talk. So why do conductors work so good when they're from Finland? It's funny because a picture of the Finns was actually very accurate. So it was very good. Yes, I think it has to do with a few reasons. I mean, we all have the same teacher, Panula, and he was really special. He really managed to have a system, a wonderful method of producing conductors. And it's a little bit like the coronavirus, it spreads. So I mean, when you have some conductors like Esa-Pekka who made it through, from a little country, of course that encourages the next generations also. And you always need this sort of new role models. The young people need them. And as I told earlier, the network of Finnish orchestras are also they've always been supporting the youngsters, which has also provided this extremely valuable sort of field work in the beginning, because if you would go directly to from school to conduct a great orchestra, they would eat you alive, because they don't have any mercy. You are either good or then you are not, and then you go or then you come back. I'm not sure about the mentality. The Finns, I mean, we don't speak much, which is good for conductor, because the less you speak, the better. And what Panula always said, help, but do not disturb.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of what's conducting all about, is helping, but not disturbing.
That's the old joke with conductors and condoms.
Yes.
Okay. It's neither without, but safer with.
Exactly. Yes.
What's left on your bucket list is wrong, but what's on your to-do list for the next time? I mean, you have all the opportunities. Is there the next symphony cycle coming up, or is there the idea of, I don't know, going to do all Shostakovich symphonies, opera, avant-garde, baroque? What's next of you to expect?
Yes.
Because you have this whole wide field where you can pick from.
So it depends sort of. for me, every week is something sort of a highlight, which I always concentrate. So for example, next week I'm going to London on Monday morning. We have 2 programs there. There's a premiere by a new piano concerto by Jimmy Lopez. Javier Perianes is playing it, and then we have classical repertoire, Richard Strauss, Zarathustra, and in the other program, Rachmaninoff Symphony and Prokofiev Concerto with Daniel Ostakovich. So that's something I'm concentrating firmly on next week. But then, of course, when it comes to my own orchestras, I have 2 different pathways with Oslo one plan and with Paris one plan, and I try not to sort of do same things in both places, because otherwise it does not make sense to have the same man leading both. So I try to do different. Of course, some pieces you can package in in different gift wrap. So I want to, in general, I like lots of different repertoire, and I think that's a richness for us conductors. If you play the cello, you can play great pieces, but there are a few concertos. But if you're a conductor, you have all the music in the world, and it's wonderful, and it's just a question which you want to concentrate on. I want to do more Baroque music with the orchestras, because it's very healthy for them. I need to make sure they play enough of the standard repertoire, because that keeps them fit, and that's also something classics which the orchestra needs to play and the audience needs to hear. To make sure we have new commissions. I follow quite a lot of new composers. I very much like these days Andrew Norman, for example, a magnificent American composer, Daniel Bjartnason or Unsuk Chin, who's wonderful. Every new piece is always something special, and it's a mixture of all of this. Opera is something I really love, because that was sparked my love for music actually in the beginning. But it's a matter of time, because opera you need time, and now I don't have time for that. But I hope that I will have time in the future. So that would be something I want to concentrate on. But opera also has to do a lot with text, and I want to do Pelléas, as I said. But then if I don't speak French, I can't do Pelléas. So I have to first speak French, and then I can do Pelléas, and that takes a few years, hopefully. So this is kind of the planning horizon a little bit. Yeah.
What do you like in the minutes before you have to get on the stage? Is it worse for you to get on the stage, or the moment when you have to get off the stage?
That's a wonderful question, by the way. Really nice. I very much like to go on stage, and after performance I always feel like I cannot conduct a bar more. It feels like it would be impossible. So I always have some bananas before and water, and when I feel that okay, I've drank enough water, I have enough bananas, then I can just forget about how I feel, and then just what's the music all about, I hope.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If you had complete freedom of choice and the fairy queen came and said you have 3 wishes, what's the next thing you'd really love to do if there's no problem of enough time, no language barrier, nothing, whatever? Bayreuth, Salzburg. What's your plan? What's your wishes?
Well, I mean, the Fairy Queen, I would definitely have a beautiful concert hall, a little bit a mixture of Elbphilharmonie and Paris Philharmonie.
But at the Riverside, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, there, and then I would have a festival opening week, where of course we will play the first concert with Oslo Philharmonic, something very nice, and then I could invite my other orchestra, Paris. And then I could invite all my favorite orchestras to Cleveland, the Concertgebouw, and then all my favorite artists play there. And then there would be a commission by Andrew Norman, which would be a sort of half-an-hour orchestral piece written to inaugurate that hall.
And you'd have a personal sauna backstage.
Of course. That's a very good. I have to remember this, by the way. When there is any architecture, that's true.
Wherever you go, you want a sauna.
That was a very good point. I have to remember. Thank you, my friend.
Okay, we're done. We've talked about this as well, so you're welcome. Thank you very much for having me, and I'm looking forward for the concerts in Hamburg.
Thank you. We can't wait.
And listening to all these 7 Sibelius symphonies in a row, and it's going to be very interesting. I'm really interested in that. And thank you very much. Enjoy your concerts and have a nice time, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Vielen Dank.
Weitere Podcasts vom Hamburger Abendblatt finden Sie auf abendblatt.de/podcast.